Okay, so let's start. Sahana bhavatu, sahanau bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavakai, tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. To show that it is a direct means of knowledge, the example was used in second verse, and that is what fire is for cooking. So that means every example has something to convey. So one thing is very important. What is your relationship with the example? Okay, you have to be careful. First, the examples in themselves don't prove anything with reference to each other. They are just indicators, right? So that means, and there is no example which is going to totally represent the final reality, because all the examples are from the relative world. So therefore, obviously it cannot totally represent the absolute. At the same time, human mind is such that it requires some visualization. It requires some aid to only logical processes are good, but you need to represent it with some kind of a example. It helps the learning. Okay. So now this example is what, just as cooking is not possible without fire. So that means, what are the secondary means? So that means what you need: vegetables, you need spices, you need little oil, you need all kinds of different things. But the primary means is what? Direct is fire. Without fire, there is no cooking. Nowadays, there is raw food, so it's so this example doesn't work too well.
In the induction,
But there's still some fire, right? So they have this now. There's a whole new technology. I meet people, I talk to them. There's some slow cooking. Slow cooking means 9 hours of cooking. Then they think, oh, the nutrients are preserved. So this is all a whole big thing. So now, what it means is, if you want to cook the food, fire is necessary. So what is it showing? If you want to know the nature of the reality of Atma, you need a means of knowledge. And what is that means of knowledge? This book. And what kind of knowledge it will give you? It will give you direct knowledge. Right? So in the break, Duksandra came to me and she said something very important. Atma means it can never be indirect. Indirect means it's away from you. So there is never going to be a time that you are away from you. So this is why it can never be indirect. Right? At the same time, you can't say it's direct means first time I listen to it and I'll get it. It's not. Therefore, it is process of knowing. So all this has to be clear. Okay? Now, the next. The same thing, this will give you all these verses. This is Adi Shankaracharya writing. So he is analytical. The verses are analytical. Right? So next. Avirodhitaya karma na avidya vinivartayet vidya avidya nihanti eva tejaha timira sangavati. Okay, who wants to read? Yeah, Stefan.
Since action is not opposed to ignorance, it cannot remove ignorance.
Knowledge alone removes ignorance, as light alone removes pitched darkness.
Okay. So that means, now the whole problem, as we have identified, that the problem is that of avidya. Avidya means not knowing the nature of Atma. Right? That's why we are concluding it is small. Avidya. And what is opposed to avidya is what? Vidya. So therefore, what he is saying is that you, like he gives an example, suppose you want to get rid of darkness, you need the opposite. And what is that? Light. You can't get rid of darkness without using its opposite, which is light. Wow. Ishvara is with it. See? Again. Okay. So now, so then he gives an example. Karma. Karma is doing something. But karma doesn't mean doing something. Karma requires, please understand, suppose action, as a, one second, suppose there is you go to a factory and in that there is a machine and it's running. Is it called karma? No, it's not called karma. So karma means it requires a karta. Karta is a doer. And the doer must have free will, the faculty of choice.
But if you open the machine, then it's karma.
Yeah. Super. Okay. Yeah. So that means if somebody goes and switches on the machine, that is karma, right? But the machine running is not called karma, because the person has used his faculty of choice in order to open it, right? Switch on. So therefore, this is what we call, so it requires a karta, and karta has to use one's free will, the faculty of choice. Right? Now, so that means this karta, by definition, is who? The individual. So that means, now what is the nature of avidya? We think that we are small, and any karma will imply that you are karta. And that karta by definition is small. Do you understand? So that means, because suppose your karma is different from my karma, so that means you are using your karma. So you are still this individual, right? So that means no matter what karma you will do, will you ever get rid of this avidya? Because it actually reinforces, right? Karta means I am the doer. I am the doer means I am small. Now being that small individual, no matter what beautiful deeds you do, it reconfirms
the original conclusion about yourself.
The original conclusion that you have about yourself, which is I am a karta. And I am a karta means you are a different karta, I am a different karta, you are a different karta, so you are the middle. So that means this, no matter how good your karmas become, and that is good. It's good to have good karma. That's not the point, right? But no amount of karma on its own, without vidya, can solve this problem. Do you see the relationship? So that doesn't mean, see, in all of these arguments, please don't be simplistic. Don't then use your own logic to say, oh, therefore karma is useless. That's not what it is saying. If you use the logic wrongly and oversimplify facts, what will happen is, this is what we call reductionism. Reductionism means very sophisticated ideas we oversimplify, and it leads to non-understanding. So what it means is that karma, of course, you have to, you do, and you do it more responsibly. That's another thing also. But just even if you do it more and more and more and more responsibly, It will not help you to remove avidya. Exactly. Because what he is saying in this verse is, it is not opposed to ignorance. It's not. Only what is opposed to ignorance is knowledge. And this is why knowledge of Atma is so important if you want to remove avidya. Is it clear? Yeah. Just as no matter what you try, you need its opposite. And karma is not opposite of avidya, this relationship. Is it clear? If you have understood the logic, I will move on. Because we have 68 verses. Okay. Okay. Parichinna na iva agnana tannashe sati kevalaha swayam prakashatehi atma megha paye amshuman iva. Who will read? Yeah, please.
Atma is as though appearing to be limited because of ignorance. When that ignorance is destroyed, then there's only one fullness. Atma shines by itself as the sun shines when the clouds are removed by the wind.
Okay. Wonderful. So that means, what it means is, Atma is what it is. So this very question that Richa asked, and this is something that is very important. If mind has to produce Atma, which is limitless, it is impossible. Why? Because it's a finite mind, and no matter what it does, it cannot produce limitlessness. But fortunately, the nature of Atma is limitless, whether you know it or not. So what the mind has to do is to use the pramana, the means of knowledge, the words, and what will the words do? Make the mind understand Atma, which is already there, and it is, what will it do? So the example is showing that what there is when the is the sun, the example is the sun, right? Sun is covered by the clouds, then the sun itself is always shining. When the clouds go away, you can see it. Are the clouds producing the sun? The sun is always there. So therefore, what does Ajnana do? So when Ajnana goes, it's like the clouds going. So when the clouds go, Atma shines by itself. You're not producing Atma. Please understand, there is no production of Atma which is limitless, which is impossible. As an activity, nobody can reach limitless. That is the simple rule, right? Finite activities don't lead to infinity. So therefore, infinity, either it is already there or it is not there. And if it is already there, then all you have to do is to remove the ignorance so that your mind can reach that infinity. So the mind cannot, the finite mind cannot produce infinity. But if infinity is already there, the finite mind can use it, understand it, using the appropriate means of knowledge. Okay? So we are not producing Atma, we are not making it limitless, it already is what it is. And we are trying to understand it as it is. Okay? So this is the function. Yes?
But can Atma be understood? Isn't it more kind of revealing of the mind, that the mind reveals the knowledge of Atma?
See, as I just told you, see, reveals the knowledge of Atma means what? Can you tell me, can you read, can you explain the what does it mean?
Like your example that the clouds are moving away and you become aware of the sun.
So, yeah, but the thing, okay, so the mind cannot by itself reveal Atma as such, because you have had the mind for ages, right? It hasn't been able to figure out. So that's why please keep in mind, otherwise you don't need to come here all the way if your mind is able to figure it out. So you come here, why? because if you need help. What kind of help? Any knowledge? So this has to be very clear. Only Vidya is opposed to avidya. This is logic. You cannot then go around and beat the bush. That is lack of clarity. And any Vidya is gained through appropriate means of knowledge. There is no knowledge which just dawns on us. Suppose you say, I want to study quantum physics. Reality is already there. It's already all just atoms and particles. Let me clear my mind and this reality will emerge. Will it emerge? No, nothing will emerge. So that means when you clear your mind, what you are doing is, when you go to biology class or when you go to physics class, you are making it more available to understand the whole thing. Please don't try to avoid this process of using the pramana and using the methodology so that the mind gets there. It is not automatically, no knowledge is going to automatically take place. Which knowledge automatically takes place? You become an accountant. Suppose you keep clearing your, it's only ignorance of accountancy going. So let my mind, remove the clouds. The accountancy will appear.
So the right word is understand.
So that means what the pramana does in this case is what? Using the pramana. So what? It's not going to automatically go away. What is the pramana going to do? Create right understandings. So that means in number of areas, not in one area. As I showed you, Katerina loved this. Each piece, how did you put together on your own? No, there was a whole leading methodology. So when the last piece was put together, what happened? The clouds of your non-thinking went away and Atma is what it is. But it's not going to go by magic. It requires a methodology. It is going to, you need an appropriate means of knowledge, and your mind has to keep applying itself, and as you apply yourself, ultimately the ignorance which covers the nature of Atma is going to go. Use the examples, as I keep telling you, that examples in themselves are just representations. They are rough representations. They are not literal. Don't take it literally. Right? So you need to understand where this example applies, how far it goes, where it doesn't represent this reality. Right? You can't use this example to say that somehow only the clouds have to go and then I will know the nature of Atma. The cloud going requires applying your mind and using a methodology. Is it clear?
Yes,
Yes.
this is clear. I was
Yes.
just wondering about the term of understanding, because for me, but maybe I got the term right, for me understanding leads a little bit to an infinite part, because if I can understand it, it seems to be like in a form and then there's a duality again.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so this is what I'm thought maybe revealing is more the term.
Yeah, see, we can't use, okay. So it's called understanding. Why? Because there is a whole big operation. So this is why, don't preempt things that I have not said, right? Why? Because behind every statement you make, I have a long lecture that I can give, right? So what is the process of knowing? How does it take place? It's vritti gnanam. What is the operation within vritti gnanam? So it's all endless. So I don't want to get into all of that. So what you need to know is, the mind is able to declutter. And the ignorance goes, what the point here is, you're not producing the sun. The sun is already there. You're not, the mind doesn't have to produce the sun. The mind only has to clear the ignorance. Exactly. And
maybe this question related to this. So all we're trying to do therefore is, mind is limited. We're
Yes.
using means of knowledge to get to the Atma, right? So what is therefore the difference between realizing Atma and experiencing nothingness? Because nothingness is also an experience, which is supposed to be profound? Is there any kind of relationship?
No, nothingness we don't talk about because I am, right? So that means you want to understand what is this I am, right? So that means nothingness means who's even talking about nothingness? Who's even thinking about nothingness? So we are not into nothingness, we are into everything. so
That's a terminology that people who meditate and all use very loosely, and it confuses.
Yeah, it confuses because the limitless is very different from shunya. It seems like similar, but it is very different. So I think over a period it will come. So that nothingness is a very common thinking also, which is I think connected to Shunyavadi school of Buddhism. So that's very different from Vedanta. So it sounds similar, but it's different. Okay? Because here we are talking about the sun which is shining. It's not about nothingness. Right? Okay. Megha Pai Anshumanura. Yeah. I will talk in the next one. He's talking about now the next is all about nature. Now this is all preparation. Now I'm going to talk about nature of Atma finally. Ajnana kalusham jivam jnana abhyasa vinirmalam krutva jnanam swayam nashit jalam kataka renuva. So now this will explain to you. Okay. What? Who wants to read? Yeah, please.
Due to ignorance, jiva, the limited self, is purified by constant practice of knowledge. Once knowledge is gained, it, Vikriyanam, itself is destroyed, like the soap nut powder settles with the dirt at the bottom of water.
Okay, so this is something which is interesting. See, the mind itself has to be used to make you, limited mind has to reach infinity. This is something it is. And how? So what is the example? What does the example tell you? That you put something, the soap powder, and then what happens? It purifies the water, and then what happens? It itself goes down, and what you get is? So this is, now let's understand first. Let me now a little bit go into the nature of art. That we have prepared enough ground. How do you use the mind to come to its own truth? So if I want to represent it, it is not an accurate representation. But just to start with, please don't use this as a final representation. This is a person. And the person is this person who has body and mind. And you have this mind and you have all the senses. So the way it is designed, and you're given the senses, so you look at the outside world and you use the data from the senses and you use the mind to get to know the world better. So now, but you want to understand that which is the truth of the mind. So this process is not, it's not going to help you to reach here. So you need the words which will show you this reality. Right? Now who has to understand this reality? Mind. You can't understand this reality without mind. So your mind itself has to use this pramana, but instead of getting there, it has to get here. Right? And after that, suppose you get it, then what happens? Mind itself has done its job. Right? So this is what it is. So how do you do it? So now let's start. We use first prakriya. What is the first prakriya? We use the first prakriya of what we call Drishya-vivica. What is a Drishya-vivica prakriya? What it means is that suppose, let's start with, there is a very lovely book by, I think, Adi Shankaracharya, which is Drishya-vivica. When he starts this prakriya, it's a very simple thing. He says, your eyes, suppose, see a form, that bottle. What is druk and what is drishya? Druk is the seer, and what is the drishya? What is seen, right? So if your eyes are seeing the bottle, what is drishya and what is druk? What, this is the seer, this is the seen, and this is the seer.
Eyes are the seer.
Eyes are the seer, and drishya is bottle. What is the relationship? Suppose the bottle is blue. Does eye become blue? No. So that means whatever the characteristics of drishya, seen, are, the seer doesn't take on. Right? In this simple example. That's why the eyes, that's why now the bottle changes into green. The eyes capture green. It itself doesn't become green. So this is what he say, that the druk itself is totally independent of drishya. In a simple operation, it is like this. Now, as Rajoshik was saying yesterday, the eyes themselves cannot do the job of seeing without the intervention of the mind. So therefore, now what becomes drishya? The eyes become drishya and the mind becomes druk. Mind is picking up the data which is coming from the eyes. So druk drishya keeps changing. Do you understand? First the bottle was drishya and eyes were druk. Now eyes themselves have become drishya and mind has become druk, the seer. Right? Now suppose the eyes themselves undergo, they are programmed in a way that they undergo so many changes in the lifetime. What are the changes? It takes, I don't know how long, the doctors will know, how long before the infant starts seeing the images clearly?
6 months.
Okay, maybe. So that means the little child begins to see the world as distinct objects at a certain, eyes don't start seeing as the adults see anymore. So that means there is a process. Then what happens is, in this, then you start wearing glasses, then by 40s you get reading glasses, then you probably can have cataract, then you can have glaucoma. So that means the eyes themselves, this is drishya, is constantly changing. And when the eyes are changing, is the mind changing along with that? Yes. No. The mind doesn't change. Whatever the conditions are, they belong to the eyes. The data reported may change, but the mind doesn't become with cataract. The mind doesn't have glaucoma. Do you understand? So the rule is, whatever happens to drishya, druk by definition is never touched by it. Right? So that means these conditions belong to eyes and the mind is not affected by this condition of the eyes. Then the mind itself is series of different thoughts, and each thought, right, many thoughts you have not yet thought of. So you don't even know what you're going to think of tomorrow. So that means, are you there or not? Right now, are you there or not? But your thought which is belonging to tomorrow or day after tomorrow is yet to come. So what's your relationship with the mind? Are you the mind? Or what happens in the mind, the changing thoughts of mind that are known to you?
you say they are in me? They're appearing in me.
This is Drishya. So that means you have to put it, you have to use this framework. So you have to, otherwise you continue with your own ideas, you don't follow the framework. The framework is used to convey something, to take you from your thinking to what Shruti wants to say. So therefore you have to use it. Right? So that means the mind now becomes Drishya. Okay. Mind becomes something that is seen, different thoughts of the mind are seen. So what happens is, right now, suppose I ask you, what is the thought which is going on in your mind? Suppose you are thinking of lunch, suppose, right? So this thought is seen by you or it is you?
Anticipated then. I have not seen it, lunch is not seen.
No, the thought, we are not talking about lunch, I'm talking about your thought. See, I'm not talking about the external object, we have moved away from external object. The external object is bottle, right? The bottle is seen through the eyes, so that means if you go to this relationship, the eyes become the seer. Now, the eyes themselves become seen and the mind becomes the seer. Now the mind is nothing but different thoughts. The mistake that we make is we take the mind as the ultimate seer. So what this pramana does is refines it a little bit. And it says, yeah, till here you are right, but there is one more step which is missing. So therefore, the mind itself is nothing but accumulation of many thoughts. And before the thought came, are you there or not? Yes. While the thought is there, are you there or not? And after the thought goes, are you there or not? Yes. And some thoughts are yet to come. Are you there or not? Yes. So that means that there is some druk that we are missing. Yeah? Just using the logic. So there is some druk that we are missing. So therefore, mind itself has now become what? Drishya. Mind and its thoughts are seen by me. Then what is this seer which I actually never think of? This is what the Shruti says. That seer is Atma. And what is the nature? It is what we call awareness. So who is doing this discrimination? Who's doing?
The mind.
The mind. All this analysis the mind is doing. And the mind is not thinking on its own. It's using Shastra. And it is using Shastra to figure out something more about oneself than what one is stuck with. One is stuck here. This is my reality for me. And what Shastra is showing me is there is a bigger reality about you, which is awareness. And what is the relationship between this awareness and the thoughts? Drishya. So the same rule applies. Whatever happens at the level of Drishya is not affecting the Druk. Druk is already free. Do you understand? And that is not just a random statement because you are taken from the same relationship applies at every level. What happens to bottle is not I is not affected by it. What happens to I, the mind is not affected by it. What happens in the mind, the awareness is not affected by it.
So, what is the difference between awareness and consciousness?
Same. It is the same. The Sanskrit word for this, also there are many. One of them is chit. Chit is translated either as consciousness or it is translated as awareness. It's the same thing. But the original word or even this the Sanskrit can keep changing. It's not only Chit. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, Prajnanam Brahma. So all these names, they all refer to this consciousness or awareness. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind when you use these words, any word that you use, what happens is consciousness, immediately your mind will produce what? Consciousness which is connected to your mind. I'm conscious, I'm unconscious, or I'm becoming aware of things. So these are all faculties of mind. So when Shastra uses this jnanam or chit, is not using a characteristic of mind. It is using one reality of you which is actually not connected to the mind. So this is why what happens is our identity ends here. This is the biggest problem in Vedanta. Our whole identity ends here. And whatever Vedanta says, you want it to apply here. Don't do it. Why? Because this is not what Vedanta is talking about. Vedanta is talking about yet another reality which is already free. Do you understand that? Oh, everybody does that. Atma is limitless. So I want the mind to feel limitless. All the time we are stuck with this and we use Vedanta to make this different. Forget it. What in that case, what you are trying to do is, what is by definition finite, you are trying to make it infinite. And you miss the point. Whole life goes in trying to make a finite mind infinite. Go ahead. There is never going to be an end to this pursuit.
But we can't do what we don't know.
So this is why you have to use the words properly. And the teacher has to make sure that your mind doesn't get stuck in wrong ideas. So that's why, I mean, nobody does it knowingly, right? It all happens unknowingly. But that's why the teacher has to make it very explicit. So suppose you use a word, even awareness, doesn't matter which word you use, whether it is awareness or you use the word consciousness, we have to be clear that we are actually what Shastra is pointing out is not awareness or consciousness which belongs to the mind. There is one more reality which is much more fundamental. And that is something which is not coming and going while the thoughts of the mind are coming and going. So suppose the reality is permanent. It doesn't mean your mind is permanent. Mind is finite. It will go away. It is programmed to be here only for 80, 90, 100 years. Right? So we are not talking about this and manipulating this mind. We are talking about using this mind to get here.
One confusion between Atma and awareness over here at that point.
No, Atma is the word, the I, no? So please don't think Atma, I'm talking about something. What we are doing is...
Can you use a darker pen, please?
Yeah.
No, or if you can just tilt this, it's shining, you can't see.
See, the whole nature, Drik is the seer, and this is what we are trying to do is figure out the nature of I, Atma. So, where is your Atma stuck? Your Atma is stuck here, in the mind. So, what are you doing? Using the Shabda Pramana. What you are trying, what the Shabda Pramana is doing is taking your Atma from mind to this awareness. Now, just 1 minute. So that means, who is doing this inquiry? The mind. Now the mind uses these words, and if they understand the word properly, it will not try to manipulate this to make it limitless. It will get to this reality which is actually independent of the mind, which we actually never thought about. Yeah. 3 hands up.
Okay, my question is, what is the transaction which is happening between awareness and mind?
Okay.
Because eyes and the picture which I see, there's a transaction happening, right?
Yes.
But what is happening between awareness and mind?
Okay, that's a good question. There is, we will see that, it will come.
Okay.
There is what we call Satya Mithya relationship. In brief, I will explain in much more detail. What it means is, without awareness, you cannot know what is going on in the mind. But even when the mind is resolved, like in deep sleep, I am still there. So that means this is the thing which is required for you to do anything in this world. Right? So without this, none of this can function. But this is independent of everything else.
And I want to go a step back and if you could expound a little bit of the effect that thoughts have on mind.
Okay, that, the effects that the thought have on the mind, absolutely. I can talk about it. I don't know if there are verses or not, but let me do it now. It is better. Then I can actually see if I make you understand this clearly, then verses will flow very easily. So let me do that. Okay? So the mind are nothing but series of thoughts. But these series of thoughts are not just random thoughts. They are organized in 4 functions. So one is what we call manas in Sanskrit. The other one is buddhi, is intellect. Then chittam is not this chit. Chittam, which is memory. And the final is I sense, which is in Sanskrit called ahankara. So that means it's not just a random mind. So what happens is external stimuli comes. So now here is a very simple example, bottle. But suppose the external stimuli comes. What is, suppose a child on the street is crying. What the eyes have reported it to you, it has reached the mind. Different centers of the mind get activated. Right? That is, first thing that is happening is the emotion that is connected to this. What is the emotion? If you are not like a robot, what will happen? And you create some discomfort in you, right? So you feel sad, you feel concerned, or you feel, oh my God, So that means your emotional centers are activated.
That's manas, right?
This is manas. Then your buddhi may decide to do something about it. Either that is your faculty of choice. Either you ignore and say, now how many kids I'm going to help? I know it's hard, but I can't just solve everybody's problem. And you walk off. Or your intellect can say, okay, at least this person is in front of me. Let me do a little bit. Or you can go home and you can say that, hey, let me help not this particular kid, but some institution where it is guided. So all these decisions are made where? In your buddhi. So the mind, the emotion has produced a stimuli, a given emotion. And your buddhi is what? Deciding what you're going to do about it, right? Either ignore it, or to do this, or to do that. Right? Now, your memory also may get activated. Your memory may get activated by saying that, oh, you know what, my dad was, he may not be a beggar, but he was struggling when he was young. And how he had to, struggle in life. Because there is some association. Right? So that means even your memory centers, or you can say, yeah, I went to Brazil and it was not as, not that many poor people as in India. So that means again, memory centers can get activated in so many different ways, not just one way. Right? And then there is this I sense which also may get activated. And there was this person, he's in Bali, he actually organized my talk in Bali. So now he writes to me on WhatsApp and he says, I see, and he's a Harvard graduate and very, very brilliant guy. And he says that I see all these people and they are struggling so much and I feel guilty. So that means for others' suffering, he is now taking on the guilt that I have everything, I have good education, he was a banker, he made a lot of money, now he is just having a good time exploring spiritual life. But he says, I feel guilty when everybody else is suffering so much. People who are into spiritual world. So that means his I sense is now loaded with guilt. So that means this is a human, so that every situation that occurs, what happens? Either all our centers get activated or different combinations of the centers get activated and we act. And this is something itself is confined, how well is how your mind is processing these emotions, what emotion it is producing and how it is processing, your intellect, your memories and your I sense, how does it all get activated? It all depends upon your overall understanding of the world. And if that mind with its limited finite data, its overall understanding of the world itself is incomplete, and it sees and all these things get activated, what happens over a period of time? His mind gets all loaded. So therefore, what we need to do is, you can't stop these functions. Nobody can stop these functions. They are also from Ishvara. So what we do need to do is improve the functions of this mind. Get all this little bit in place so that mind, which is relatively clear, can understand what there is something more fundamental. If this mind is totally clouded with all kinds of impressions and the meaning that it has attributed to those impressions and all that, it's too busy in its own stories, it will never get to what Shastra is talking about, the real nature of mind. So what the whole preparation is, get this faculty moving well properly. And kind of refine the understanding of this faculty with proper knowledge of things. Re-look at reality, re-look at the world in which you are living. So this gets more sharpened. And as it gets more sharpened, you can use it to get to this point.
So would it be fair to say when, for example, if I say I am stressed, it's not I, the Atma, which is stressed, but it's the mind which is stressed.
Super. Excellent. And that doesn't mean, so please don't use Vedanta to say, oh, I'm always free, I'm always free. Even if mind is stressed, it requires, the stress is an indicator that your mind is overwhelmed. So that means you have to put it back into proper perspective and deal with it so that the mind is not in this overwhelmed mode anymore. This is why that eligibility is very important, right? Otherwise, what will happen is, you will keep ignoring whatever is in the mind by saying I'm awareness and I'm already free from everything. And this is the most common way that people use Vedanta, and it becomes some other trip because it really encourages this dissociation from your body, dissociation from your mind, pretending that is just an object and you are this subject which is free. That is delusionary. So you have to use it properly. So that means when the understanding is, so suppose in this case, right? Suppose you say in this case, let's look at it here. Suppose you say the mind is not afflicted by the conditions of the I. The conditions of the I belong to the I, not to the mind, but still suppose you have cataract, you will take care of it, right? You're not going to say, oh, mind is unaffected by I, so therefore I'm free. Are you going to use this logic like that? So that means the placement of everything has to be at the right place. Otherwise, whole of Vedanta becomes an escape. mind will delude itself to say, I am not affected by anything. So that means, yes, the problem doesn't belong to mind, it belongs to eyes, but it still requires fixing. Do you understand? So it is wrong attribution which is corrected by Vedanta. Confusion, this is why avidya is a problem. Your mixing up reality is a problem. Even when it is corrected, your mind will use this correction in its own way to justify something else and not actually understand it. This is why you have to use Vedanta accurately. Yes, whatever inaccuracies in these processes are there, they don't belong to awareness, but they still require corrections. They require corrections because without actually these corrections, this mind has to be used to get here. It is all inaccuracies, it can't get here.
I'm not sure I have understood the difference between Chit and Atma.
This Chitta.
Chit, no, the other one.
Okay.
I don't know how I'm pronouncing it.
Okay, yeah. Okay. This Atma. Now we are doing this, see, Soleil, look here. We are doing an inquiry into Atma. And we are using a prakriya. What is a prakriya? Prakriya is a methodology to get to the real nature of Atma and not what you think Atma is. Right? So how did we use this prakriya? We said that there is something called seer and seen. And what did we do? We started with a simple object. What did we do? Okay, take one simple object called bottle. Now this whole prakriya is used to get to Atma, right? So therefore, the bottle is, you need, with reference to the bottle, the first seer is what? The eyes. But what is the relationship between bottle and eyes? Whatever the characteristics of the bottle are, they don't belong to the eyes. Then we say the eyes themselves, right, they actually require yet another seer, which is the mind, without which what? The eyes cannot see the bottle. So then the eyes have different conditions. And then what did we see? That these are the conditions of Drishya. The Druk doesn't take on. Then we said, now for us, all of us, till you come to Vedanta, I is equal to mind. Now what Vedanta does, this is the value added of Vedanta. Otherwise you don't need Vedanta, right? So Vedanta goes one step further and it says, well, the mind itself is nothing but thoughts, and the thoughts are all Drishya, and there is a Druk which is awareness, and it is not affected by the different conditions of the mind. So if you use this prakriya, what is the relationship between I and awareness? It's the same, right? So my nature is not mine, my nature is awareness, right? You're using this methodology to come to this. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
And shift is another word for
Okay.
So in the example that you said, where I is the medium and then the mind is the group, right?
Yeah.
So we are talking about conscious mind, but we've also got an unconscious mind, which is the dreams, right?
Okay, wonderful. So what Rajushik is doing is, this chitta, which is a memory, itself can be divided into two parts. One is what we call conscious memory, and the other one is the unconscious memory. So what happens is, as we perceive, right? So that means, as I give you the example, you see a person on the street, suppose begging. So each one's, of course, emotional response will be different. Each one's intellect, the choices will be different. But what it can evoke in that person is also very different, depending upon not only what is there in your conscious memory, but also in your unconscious.
So do you relate a dream to be awareness, or is it still a state of mind?
So a dream is also a state of mind. No? It creates its own reality in the dream state.
But then what will be the Dishwa in that? Because That will be the
It's still awareness. The druk is always awareness. We will
G?
see that. Let's move forward. Otherwise, what will happen is just stick to this verse. That because there are lots of prakriyas and each one will make something and something and something more clear. So within one verse, if you want to understand everything is not possible. Just use this prakriya to see what it is conveying, and if you can somehow get to what it wants to say. Yeah.
So my question is, if mind is a collection of thoughts, I look at the bottle and maybe I feel thirsty. Maybe I don't want to touch it. So mind changes. A new thought appears in the mind, right? With that transaction. So similarly, when mind and awareness is there, if the state of mind, can it influence the awareness?
No, this is the thing. That is the thing. That's what you need to, because see, why am I showing this relationship? See, you have to understand why am I showing this relationship. Whatever happens to bottle doesn't affect the... See, unless you use the logic and follow the logic of what is the point of all of this, what will happen is your mind will keep eluding what is the point here, right? This is why you are given logics. What is the logic? The characteristics of Drishya don't affect the druk. And it's shown not only with reference to mind and awareness, but it starts with a simple object and the progressive relationships.
So the jiva, what is being referred to as jiva is the limited self or the mind in the verse.
So that means in this, right now, this body and mind is what we refer to as an individual jiva, but that itself will get further defined. I mean, now it's knowledge within knowledge, but let's stick to this now. Yeah, but exactly.
Can I ask just one?
Yes.
So when you say I am awareness, so who is I in this? Drake.
So, exactly.
Of awareness.
So that means my nature is that I thought my real nature was equivalent to my mind. Now what I am saying is my nature is awareness. That is my more fundamental nature, because of which I am able to see what is going on in my mind. I am able to see everything else.
But who is that I?
So exactly, of the nature of awareness. This is what it is
So I am
revealing.
expressing infinite through finite. I mean, I am awareness. Or should we say it's awareness?
Yeah. So see.
There is no I and I am awareness. It's
Yeah.
either I or awareness. You cannot put.
There is no difference between I and awareness. My nature is awareness. And what is that awareness? So Atma is Chit. The nature of Atma is awareness. And where is that awareness? It is something which is available to you. So this is what Surya was saying. It is self-shining. Like the sun, which is self-shining, but it is covered by your ignorance. Use this thing, right? Are we producing awareness through the mind? No. Like awareness is like the sun, which is always there, without which nothing that happens in the mind can ever be known. But this awareness, which is always there, gets what? Like megha. Like the clouds, it gets covered. And because it gets covered, what happens? Our conclusion is, I'm as good as the mind. Now what is done? The mind, using the pramana, the means of knowledge, what does it do? It removes the ignorance. When it removes the ignorance, the awareness, it shines not because it is produced, it was always there, but because of our non-understanding, it was as though covered.
Just relating the ahamkara or the antakarana. So we have 4 divisions. So could we say that the ahamkara equals drik and chitta manas and buddhi equals drishya?
You can create little bit this distinction, but ultimately it's very important you don't get stuck here, because this is not what the teaching is talking about, right?
I was just talking about the
but
antakarana.
it is true. within Antakarna, you can do one more Drishya, according to Andre. What you can see is your eye sense is what watching, what your mind is, what your intellect is doing, you're extracting from your memory. So this eye sense, so this is something which is, now people use Vedanta, I'll tell you how. What they do is, they create some kind of a physical separation. And they say, this is all object and this is me. But Vedanta is not talking about this. This is a very common thing also. I am the observer. What is this I am the observer?
Function of the
It is a
mind.
function.
So we try to put the awareness.
I am the experiencer. And all these are experiences. I'm stuck here. So this is when, this is also yet another common problem with Vedanta. So that means you almost within the four functions, you create one which is doing the job of observing, and you create a distance. And I am this observer. We are not talking about an observer or anything. Observer means it is limited. Why is it limited? Because it's your particular observation. I can be doing something totally different. It is limited, it is finite, it is changing. Please don't impute on this something which is, then what will happen is your mind will be so deluded because you have introduced another idea called infinity, but you have imputed it on finite.
Is it also the ego? Like the I sense?
Yeah,
We have a
I
big
sense
ego.
is ego, but ego doesn't mean that it is bad or anything. It only means I sense. So that means, suppose I say, I am observing. So suppose I change the vocabulary. Right? Before I said I'm sad. Now, after listening to Vedanta, I said, no, I'm not sad because the sad is the function here. This is an emotion, but I'm observing sadness. What have you done? You have moved your eye sense from here to here, but you still have, you're caught here and you think this is what Vedanta is talking about. And what you do is you create iso distance between these three functions and this. This reality, which is awareness, is a much bigger reality. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahman. It's not some small entity or anything. So that means that your mind has to use these prakriyas, and you have to understand what this prakriya is trying to do. What is it conveying? It's not just some thing that's just given to you like that and you continue to think with your own mind. You have to use it to get to what Shastra wants to show you about your true nature.
So can we say that we are trying to move the awareness in the ahankara, which is, yeah, we cannot express awareness through words, so it's rather a process of understanding satyamita relationship than experiencing our nature. It's not available for experience.
Well, I will say the other way. This is also the most common thing now. Everybody, like somebody says, oh, it's not available for experience, so everybody repeats. But what it means is, please understand, without this, no experience can take place. So what does it mean? It is, for you to experience anything, it requires a presence of awareness. So please don't say, oh, it cannot be experienced. It's not a given experience. But it is something which is, actually I'll put it around the other way. It's one thing which is always with you while the experiences change. And because of which all the experiences are possible. But it itself is not a given experience.
Not a given observation, but without which everything can be super.
So that means without this, you can't know this. Right? But it's none of the given thing here.
But the mind always tries to get this into the mind.
Exactly. So the mind, what happens is, keeps working here, and it uses Vedanta to do things here. And that's why mind is so clever. It will create all these, you'll use Vedanta, you'll create distances and all, and you will not understand that actually I'm playing with the finite and trying to superimpose infinite. And this can go on for years. It drives you nuts.
So you would say the schools or the teachers who say who's observing, they are stuck to
this. Absolutely. This whole school, who's observing, who's doing this, who's doing that, they're all stuck where?
In the mind.
In the mind. So that means here, within this mind, thank you Andre for bringing it out, what they are doing is they are creating this distance. This is an observer and this is being observed. And this, then they say, is free. And you are stuck. So that means the whole life becomes what? Observing everything and being uninvolved in everything. And that is still very finite. Why? Because this observer is going to remain, this mind is programmed to be there for maximum 100 years. All four functions will go away. Understand? The observer itself is very finite. And one observer is different from another observer. So you are the observer of your happiness, and I'm the observer of my sadness, suppose. So there are how many observers? Many, observing all the different things. So how they're all finite? Do you understand? Do you understand all the problems that are related to staying within mind and trying to superimpose limitlessness here? Problem. Yeah, so Lynn, you had?
No, I think you've answered. So it's not even a step, a necessary step. It's a step you should avoid. Because we could think that one step, knowing that there is awareness, but one step would be already to, so we shouldn't even go into that.
I would suggest not. Okay. I would never do it. I, as a teacher, never do it. Some teachers do it. And why do they do it? I'll tell you also. Why do they do it? They do it because sometimes our emotional loads, our sadness and all is so strong that what it does is that little space it creates for you to kind of handle it without getting totally connected to it. So it's a technique which is used by some teachers. But there is a danger in that, because then it almost as though it seems as though Vedanta is talking about this. And you're constantly trying to, even somebody who has listened to Vedanta, and this recently, right, when I explicitly said, please don't create a distance, this is awareness and these are my thoughts. Suppose you create this distance, what will happen? This is an object and this is a subject, and is this infinite?
It's all the mind.
There is this, what will happen is this is different from here, so it becomes one of the objects in the universe. So these are techniques which can be used very mindfully, but it has to be explicitly told that we are not actually trying to create distance within the mind. It's one way to deal with loads of the mind. But we can't take this as the reality. Otherwise, the whole thing becomes the mind is trying to somehow get this to become limitless. That's why the whole experience, I have to experience something different, everything has to be different for me. This all is because of this confusion.
Can I put it differently?
Yeah.
See, there are psychologists, they will correct me if I'm wrong or not. See, the psychological approach will encourage you to take this distance, which is a natural distance, right? It's not nothing new. You don't need Vedanta here. You're aware of your thoughts, you're aware of your emotions, okay? You're aware of your dreams, and you try to work with that and make sense of what is happening here, right? You are aware of your beliefs, your prejudices, your distortion, and as you become aware of that, you try to see, oh, is there any distortion here in my way of thinking? Or is it really useful to me to fall into a victim mode and tell myself stories of victimhood? Okay? So in this process, which is there is a certain, let's say, distance here created, which is like psychological distance, which enables you then to free yourself from these stories, which are not helpful. Okay? So this is there, and it is given to any human being to do that. And in fact, in Vedanta, it's called also Sakshi Pratyaksha. It means you are aware, as an individual, we are not speaking about awareness, you are aware of your internal states, whether it's body, whether it's hunger, whether it's emotions, whether it's thought. There is a means of knowledge, in addition to the sensory perception, which is given to every human being, which is this Sakshi Pratyaksha, okay? Inner perception. As long as you stay within a psychological framework, it's very useful and it works beautifully, okay? And it helps people to free themselves from their psychological load. Now, what Neema is saying is very interesting, is that if you stay there within this psychological framework, now having listened to some Vedanta, and you try to make this observer, which is me, okay, this psychological self-inquirer and so on, as this limitless awareness, then it becomes a problem. That's all what we say. We're not negating the fact that this distance is used therapeutically very well in psychology. We are saying if you equate this Sakshi, this person with this limitless awareness, you are making a mistake. You are still trapped and staying at the level of the mind. That's all we're saying. Is it clear?
Yeah.
It's a preparation.
Yeah, that's a nice explanation.
Yeah, can we say it's a preparation like in the meditation?
Yes, exactly.
When you are starting in the morning, be aware of all what is happening in body and mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. Certain objectivity that you have, but it stays there.
Is it clear? Yeah.
But would it be a fair point to say that from the Vedantic point of view, psychology is reinforcing a distortion? Because it seems to say that the human being ends with this subtle body or whatever it's called.
So that is, it's true. So even, and that's the thing. We are all working within avidya. And what we are trying to do is trying to get to vidya. Right? So avidya means I'm a karta, I'm this individual. So everything that we do, in fact in this world, it all operates within here. And this is why we actually are trying to, so you're right. In fact, everything that we do operates within, it reinforces avidya. It's true. So ultimately you want to get to vidya. That's true. Because this is why, as I told you, put it differently. The smallness is a reality for us. No matter what we do, that smallness doesn't get shaken. This is the only knowledge which actually questions, am I small or am I not small? This is how it is different. It's a paradigm shift. But it doesn't mean everything that you do within avidya is bad. Please don't think so. Because everything that you do, for example, you remove your distortions, that at least will help you because it will make your mind a little bit better. Then if you study physics, it is still within avidya, but it will help your logical processes. Anything that else you do, improve your creativity, your transaction with the world will improve your emotional life. All of that will actually help towards solving this problem of avidya. But in themselves, they are still operating within avidya. Is it clear?
Yeah. So, going back a bit, to become an adhikari of the sambandha with, say, Atma Bodha, I need to clear the purification of the papas required.
Yeah.
Now, when the mind is cluttered, is there anything in Vedantic teaching which also helps the mind to be clear, or at least reduce all the papas, or is it?
Yes.
You need to do
No.
it separate?
So the whole evening class is about that, right? The starting point of evening class is about, that is a question of Arjuna. What is he asking? He's saying, can I keep thinking about? Now let's put Bhagavad Gita in context. What was his question? Do I only think about this awareness, which is the final goal that I need to, or do I also bring Ishvara? So what was Lord Krishna's answer today? You need Ishvara, because the thing is, this awareness you can't get to until it's all decluttered. And this, how will you undo the clutter? The first question you ask yourself is, what is the world in which I'm living? Am I living in a random world? Am I living in an unfair world? Because that will decide what you're going to do. Or am I living in an intelligent world? And suppose I'm living in an intelligent world, but because of my incomplete perception, it gives me a data that it is an unfair world, then all my decisions are going to come from this implicit assumption. So I have to change that very fundamentally. This is yet another very fundamental change. And I have to see it as pervaded by intelligence.
And that's exactly why Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita go hand in hand.
Absolutely. They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand because you can't change this much bigger picture without changing this. They are all connected. So that means this is not just psychological decluttering. This is a very fundamental decluttering by bringing Ishvara in your life.
So this is the difference between the psychological model of getting well, getting better, or more lucid and joyful, and here the Vedanta model of growing and maturing more. So there are some differences. There are some commonalities, but this is something which is not there in any school of psychology, right? Bringing Ishvara, they will say, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Is it not very helpful to see it as like functions? So one of the functions of the mind is like memory, and you can improve your memory. And the same is with the eye sense. You can improve.
That's a very nice way to do it. This decluttering of the mind, actually if you use these functions, you can improve all these functions, right? So that is what we call clearing the mind. So what you can do, you can improve your emotional life by really understanding things or dealing with your emotions. You can improve your logical processes, your buddhi. You can improve, you can free yourself from the unconscious memory which guides your actions, which sometimes you don't realize. Some situations trigger great sadness or anger or fears in you. So that means there is some unconscious which is processing the data in a certain way, which is giving you such an overwhelming reaction. So that can be improved. Your eye sense, your self-image can be improved. If you are giving yourself the messages of inadequacies, you can improve that. Actually, you can make all these functions much better. As you improve these functions and these functions become sharper, less projecting, then same mind can solve this.
I would like to mention something from a very practical point of view as a psychologist, because patients usually come because they want to get rid of depression symptoms, anxiety disorder, and so on. And if they don't ask for something bigger, it is difficult for us to implement or impose on them something they don't ask for. Doesn't
Absolutely.
mean that there is no transpersonal psychology approach or something like that.
Sure.
The majority of people are on this place, the place of getting rid of symptoms. So still this mind thing stuck in mind. Yeah.
It's okay. I mean, I think, see, because in fact, the starting point of Vedanta is that unless we saw two eligibility. One eligibility is that even your mind has to come to the point that you want something bigger. Then after having recognize there is something bigger, there is still further eligibility of further clearing up. So what you are saying is that they haven't even come to the first eligibility. So it's okay, you have to help them in their paradigm. Right? Nothing wrong.
What is about this Sakshiba meditation we practice in yoga? What? Sakshiba?
Sakshiba. So this is like a little bit what Surya was saying.
This is what you... So you mean this is not so helpful for advanced students? It's in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what I'm saying, see, I don't know whether advanced or beginning or whatever, but if you think that you're trying to work here, and if you are confused, and if you think that I'm actually getting here, that is a problem.
Yeah.
If you understand that I'm working here and I'm using it for this, then it's fine. Do you understand? It's a clarity which is important.
See, like
what you do
meditation,
is...
this morning, what did we do? We started by just being aware of your body.
Yeah.
That's fine. I mean, it's like amazing. And just being aware of your breathing. That itself brings a certain, let's say, composure and absorption in the mind. But I said very clearly, this is just a preparation for you, then to be able to inquire more upon certain things. So it has its place. Don't negate and throw everything afterwards.
No,
right?
if it is confusion, then it's a problem.
Yeah.
But if you know what you're doing
What you're
and
doing,
where it
exactly.
applies, then there is no problem.
And this is why, for those who have noticed in the meditation, I said, hey, I am coming back to myself just as an awareful person. And I said, hey, this is not Atma. I said specifically, for those who have noticed. Okay?
Okay, so now, this is the process. The mind using this Drishya, the prakriya, and the logics of what is the relationship between Drik and Drishya, it comes to know another reality, which is a much bigger reality than what it is used to. Okay, 1 o'clock. So I'll just Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Mm-hmm.